Have you ever had a gut feeling so powerful it stopped you in your tracks? That inexplicable urge to take a different route home? Or that strange sensation that you shouldn't trust someone who seemed perfectly nice? What if these weren't just random intuitions, but messages from your future self, reaching back through time to guide you away from mistakes they've already experienced? Let's start with something we've all experienced, those moments of inexplicable knowing that seem to come from nowhere. Science tells us that time moves in one direction, always forward, never backward. But quantum physics has revealed something fascinating. At the smallest scales of reality, time doesn't behave the way we think it does. Some particles appear to influence their own past, and information seems to travel backward through time in ways we're only beginning to understand. Think about déjà vu for a moment. That strange sensation that you've experienced something before, even when you know you couldn't have. Traditional science explains this as a glitch in our memory systems. But what if it's something more? What if déjà vu is actually a moment when your consciousness intersects with a future memory, creating a brief loop in time where you're experiencing something both now and in the future simultaneously? Consider those vivid dreams that feel more like memories than random neural firing. Dreams where you encounter places you've never been, people you've never met, but somehow know intimately. Years later, when you actually encounter these places or people, it feels like you're completing a circle that began with that dream. What if your future self was sending you previews of important moments, preparing you for what's to come? The concept of quantum retrocausality suggests that future events can influence the past. Scientists have observed particles that appear to be affected by measurements that haven't happened yet. If this is possible at the quantum level, could our consciousness be capable of similar temporal loops? Could our future selves be reaching back through these quantum channels to influence our present decisions? Think about those moments of sudden, inexplicable anxiety that warn you away from certain choices. You might be about to board a plane, and something tells you not to. Or you're considering taking a job that looks perfect on paper, but something deep inside screams no. What if these aren't just random feelings, but temporal echoes of experiences your future self is trying to help you avoid? The phenomenon of intuition becomes even more fascinating in this context. Scientists have discovered that our bodies often react to future events before they happen. Studies show that our nervous systems can respond to stimuli seconds before we consciously experience them. Could this be evidence of a broader temporal communication system, where our future consciousness influences our present physical responses? Consider how many successful people report following their gut instincts to make crucial decisions. What if these aren't just accumulated wisdom operating unconsciously, but actual information from a future self who knows the outcomes? Those hunches that lead to seemingly lucky breaks might be your future self helping you navigate toward the best possible timeline. But here's where it gets really interesting. What if we're not just passive receivers of these future messages, but active participants in a temporal dialogue? Those moments of intense visualization, where you imagine your future self achieving your goals, might actually be creating quantum connections through time. You might be establishing the very channels through which your future self will later communicate back to you. The concept of synchronicity, meaningful coincidences that seem too perfect to be random, takes on new significance in this light. What if these aren't coincidences at all, but carefully orchestrated moments arranged by your future self? Those perfect timing instances where you meet exactly the right person or discover exactly what you needed might be your future self creating the conditions for your success. Think about those moments of sudden clarity, when the solution to a problem simply appears in your mind. Scientists call this the incubation effect. But what if it's more than that? What if your future self, who has already solved this problem, is sending the answer back through time, helping you avoid the painful process of trial and error they had to endure? The idea becomes even more profound when we consider the nature of consciousness itself. If consciousness isn't bound by the same linear time constraints as physical matter, it might be capable of extending both forward and backward through time. Your present consciousness might be just one point in a vast temporal network, constantly communicating with past and future versions of yourself. Consider how many people report receiving strong intuitive warnings before disasters or accidents. These premonitions are often dismissed as coincidence or selective memory. But what if they're actually temporal distress signals? Your future self, having experienced or witnessed these events, might be desperately trying to prevent them from happening. But here's where we need to be careful. If our future selves are trying to communicate with us, why don't we receive clearer messages? The answer might lie in the nature of temporal communication itself. Just as radio signals can become distorted over long distances, temporal messages might become metaphorical or symbolic as they travel backward through time. This might explain why these messages often come as feelings, dreams, or subtle intuitions rather than clear instructions. Think about those recurring dreams or persistent thoughts that won't leave you alone. What if these aren't just your subconscious mind processing information, but your future self trying to get an important message through? The repetition might be necessary because temporal communication is difficult, requiring multiple attempts to break through the noise of everyday consciousness. The concept of calling your future self through meditation or visualization might not be mere metaphor. By focusing your consciousness on future possibilities, you might be creating quantum entanglements that your future self can use to send information back. Those moments of deep meditation where you feel connected to a wiser version of yourself might be actual temporal communication sessions. But perhaps the most intriguing aspect of this idea is its implications for personal responsibility. If your future self is trying to guide you, then every decision you make not only affects your present, but creates the future self who will eventually reach back to help you. This creates a fascinating temporal loop of self-help and self-creation. Consider how this perspective might change your approach to decision-making. Instead of just considering the immediate consequences of your choices, you might start thinking about what kind of future self you're creating, one who will have the wisdom and capability to send back helpful guidance when needed. As we wrap up this exploration, think about how you might become more attuned to these potential messages from your future self. Perhaps those subtle intuitions, unexpected dreams, and inexplicable feelings deserve more attention than we typically give them. Maybe by acknowledging and acting on these temporal communications, we can create stronger connections with our future selves. So the next time you feel an unexplainable urge to take a different path, or experience a dream that feels more like a memory of the future, remember, this might not be just random neural firing or coincidence. It might be your future self, reaching back through the quantum fabric of time, trying to guide you toward the best possible future. The question is, are you ready to listen? Remember, whether or not these temporal communications are literally real, treating our intuitions and inner guidance as messages from our future selves might help us make better decisions and create the future we want to experience. After all, who better to guide us than the person we will become?